Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 1, Episode 11, The Wolf Inside. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I'll have to start with the spoiler warning for Discovery up to Season 1, Episode 11. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, this episode continues off of the strength of the last week's episode, which I was a bit worried that last week's episode might be a one-time thing, but apparently not. This episode was almost as good, I would say. I think I liked last week's episode slightly better, but that's not really saying much because this was still, as I said, this was still a strong episode that continued the forward momentum, which, frankly, definitely better than the first half of the season. So the second half is, it's really been great. It's wowing me. Like, nothing in the first half, like, really wowed me. Like, I thought there were a lot of good moments and several, fairly good episodes, but nothing I thought, like, was like, oh, wow, this show's amazing. In the second half, it is being amazing, so we'll see how long they can keep this up, but so far, so good. So anyway, the episode is, starts with Michael Burnham, having to impersonate her Mirror Universe counterpart on the Shenzhou, and this is really great. I love like the montages and the voiceovers of her trying to play the role and how she's worried about losing herself in this like dark version of herself, and that's actually really interesting. And one thing I think is really worth noting is how well she does at pretending to be this evil side of her. Like if you compare it to like say Kirk in Mirror Mirror, he did a fairly shitty job of impersonating the evil Kirk because he was still trying to be all sort of save people or whatever, and it was quite frankly, it made him vulnerable, and that's why Chekhov and a lot of other people tried to kill him because they could see that he looked suddenly weaker and different. So Burnham, for her part, is actually doing a good show of not appearing weak, of appearing just as strong as ever, and she's doing a great job of it. But then I love the contrast when you see her alone with Tyler and alone with Lorca. You can see her true side, and that it is all an act. She just is able to pull off the act very well. In particular, like the way she tried to not kill the rebels. Like, again, you compare to Kirk. Kirk was very oblique about, oh, don't blow them up. Where she's not. She's trying to sort of, oh, we're going to go in there and this will be better because we'll get intel. But she's trying to find some way that doesn't blow her cover, but at the same time try to save the rebels, which was, it was really interesting, really well pulled off. I thought, it was very interesting. And of course, everyone was wondering what Saru was up to in this mirror universe. I myself said that maybe we wouldn't see him because he's an alien, but then we find out he's an alien slave on board the Shenzhou, and so he cares for Burnham. And that is interesting. I mean, most of these Mirror Universe episodes, they find a way to bring in characters we're familiar with, even if it doesn't make complete sense. Like in the Deep Space Nine Mirror episodes, they had Dax show up who really shouldn't have anything to do with anything. But, I don't know, like, I was watching the After Trek show, and they were saying that Saru was, they had to have him be a slave because he's an alien. And they'd established the Terran Empire as being, xenophobic and racist or whatever. But we have seen in other Mirror Universe episodes, like in Mirror Mirror and in The Mirror Darkly, we have seen aliens work in the Terran Empire before. In fact, that was a huge thing in The Mirror Darkly, is we had Phlox and T'Pol be members of the Terran Empire, but they were sort of, I don't know, they were put sort of at arm's length. Although that episode didn't end with them defecting to this Rebel Alliance thing, so maybe since then they kept aliens at more of an arm's length. But in Mirror Mirror, in the original series, Spock is the first officer And I mentioned this last week's episode too. He talked about Vulcans being actually a strong member of the Terran Empire. So it seems to me like Discovery, and I don't want to be one of those people, but it seems to me this isn't inconsistent the way Discovery is portraying the Terran Empire, because it's saying they're strictly human, which isn't necessarily. They would conquer, you got the idea they would conquer species and integrate them into their workforce, not just as slaves, but also as military members. As we see, Phlox was a full-on doctor, and Spock was the first officer of the Enterprise. So there should be other aliens integrated in wearing Terran uniform, but that's just, minor thing. Whatever. So then we actually get to meet the rebels, and this was really cool because this is the first time we actually see Andorians and Tellarites on Discovery, and it was really cool because the makeup was slightly updated from Enterprise, but not too. It wasn't like too big of a deal, like a huge makeover. They still look very similar to the way they did in Enterprise, but it was just slightly modernized, slightly updated, and quite frankly, that's what they should have done with the Klingons. What they did with the Klingons, and I'm never going to let this go, this is one thing about Discovery I always hold against it, unless they change it, which I doubt they will, but I would love it if they did. Because a lot of people say, like, oh, they had makeup changes before. The Klingons in the original series looked nothing like Klingons in Next Generation, and the Romulans in the original series looked nothing like the Romulans in Next Generation, blah, 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 blah. But it's not that they do a makeup change, it's that they did a very bad one. It's too drastic. They don't have hair. They look like demons. It's hard to relate to these as Klingons. And as I said, even though you could say, oh, the change from original series to Next Generation, or the movies when they first did it, was drastic as well, to me, like, the Klingons weren't that well established in just the original series. They were in like 6 episodes or whatever, but there was like lore upon lore in Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and the films, and even Voyager a bit, and Enterprise, all like expanded and explored upon the Klingons as we know it, and established. That's what established their culture, established their language, established all this stuff. So the Klingons have been really like cemented in the version that we know them from Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, the feature films, Voyager, Enterprise. That's cemented. Like, the original series is 6 episodes. Like, oh, my dear Captain Kirk. All inconsistent with the others. So it's fine to change that, but to have like this established lore and established feel and just to totally throw that away is a humongous difference. And I get really irritated when people try to dismiss it as, oh, you're being silly, their makeup changes happened before. There's a difference. And as I said, I'm not opposed to a makeup change, but it should have been more like what they did with the Andorians and what they did with the Tellarites, where especially the Tellarites look a lot different than they did in Enterprise, but not so different that they're unrecognizable. You can still tell they're the Tellarites, and it still looks very similar. The Andorians, they only changed slightly, which is great. So they should have did something like that with the Klingons. They can update their makeup, make it look more modern, make it look better, but not so drastic. They keep their hair, for fuck's sake. And yeah, that's what they should have done with the Klingons. So I don't know. Maybe I'm still hoping that in season 2 they'll retcon this and change their makeup again to make it a bit more similar to Next Generation, but still updated. I don't know. Anyway, it was great seeing these species, and of course, the big irony here is you had the Tellarites, Andorians, Vulcans working with the Klingons, and I love that this was the catalyst for sort of Voke's or Tyler's transformation to Voke, his realization of who he really is, because, and I love the way they played this because they showed flashbacks to the T'Kuvma in the first episode, which again I feel very strongly that those first 2 episodes needed to exist and weren't just in flashbacks, but digressing again. Anyway, seeing flashbacks to the first episode where T'Kuvma is talking about how the humans are taking over and how they're evil because they integrate with all these species. So, I mean, this is true mirror universe fashion that the Mirror Universe version of Vok is pretty much the opposite of Prime Universe Vok, because Prime Universe Vok was all about, oh, it's disgusting to integrate with all these other races, whereas Mirror Universe Vok was all about integrating with the races. And I love that was sort of the driving force of the plot of what Burnham wanted to learn. Because it's interesting. And again, this is I think these episodes in particular have a really strong Star Trek feel to it. So everyone's going, oh, Discovery isn't Star Trek. They just couldn't be more wrong. There's such a strong Star Trek feel to it, especially when Burnham says to Lorca that rather than try to defeat the Klingons in battle, we should try to negotiate with them. And she saw this opportunity of this rebel where Klingons actually working with other races. She wants to understand more about how this happens so she can take that back to the Prime Universe and try to negotiate a peace with the Klingons. I'm not so sure how strong that is. I mean, because these are totally different Klingons. This is a totally different Mirror Universe that had a totally different history. But I suppose at the heart, they're still the same people, and just history played out a bit differently. So maybe she's just thinking there's a way for them to connect, there's a way for her to connect. And I wonder what her big takeaway from her conversation with Mirror Vok was, because it didn't really get into that in this episode. It seems to me that the conclusion that she drew of why he was working with the other races more open to it is because they had a common enemy. Now, I'm not really sure how that would help her in the Prime Universe unless they come up with a common enemy. I don't know. So I don't know, maybe there was a bit more to it than that, because it was great seeing how much Mirror Vok trusted like Vulcans, and he really trusted Sarek. And again, like, I know some people will rant on the fact that he has a goatee, and granted that's become a trait. Like in the Mirror Darkly did that too with, I can't remember his name, but the Ambassador Vulcan guy who's a recurring character in Enterprise. They give him a goatee in the Mirror Universe too. I think they're just going to say that's the Vulcan look in the Mirror Universe. They all have goatees, and I don't mind that. I think that's a fine homage to the whole, because that's one of the most iconic parts of Mirror was the fact that Spock had a goatee. So they want to homage that all the time. I actually have no issue with that. So it was great that I wonder if Mirror Sarek did know that Burnham was from a parallel universe, because he didn't. I don't know. He talked about it in vague terms, like she's her intentions were clear. It does seem like he was really affected by this vision of having this other, the Federation, where all these species work together for the betterment, and seeing this different version of humans. But I don't know. I don't know if he understood in logical terms of like parallel universe. He just knew that Burnham was someone that could be trusted, which I hope because I hope they don't feel like, I don't know, I feel like the rebels might feel like Burnham betrayed them, and maybe they'll trust Sarek less because he said to trust her, because of course the Giorgio shows up and bombs their base before they finish evacuating. I'm pretty sure that like all the main characters like Vok and Sarek are alive, made it out alive, and we'll probably see them again. But that's just my guess. I could be wrong about that. Okay, so now let me get into the whole Vok is Tyler's Vok thing. Which, of course, this is something many have predicted for many, many months. I, of course, was on board with this theory since episode 5 or 6 or something. Maybe it was episode 7. I don't know, something like that. Way back when. So it was great to finally see that revealed. Of course, last week we got the reveal he is a Klingon, but they didn't definitively say Vok, but of course everyone knew it's Vok. We got that definitively answered here, and I think it's great. It was really high drama, the way it was revealed. Like, he attacks the other Vok because he's like, how dare you want to integrate with these other species and whatever. And that's interesting. And then, of course, he comes back on board and he's remembering seeing Burnham kill his mentor, Takuma. So he's basically, full on, become reclaiming his identity with Vok, which is apparently that's what should have happened when Laurel spoke that catchphrase to him in the last week's episode, but it didn't work, and she was a bit freaked out, like, why isn't it working? And I think the producers talked a bit about this, as saying that the human memories they planted, the personality they implanted was sort of a bit more overwhelming than they thought it would be, so it had a different effect. But what was the final trigger was seeing this other Vok, like this other version of himself, say these things that he thinks is a betrayal. And so I think that makes perfect sense. And I think it played out wonderfully. And of course, like, again, this is great drama, great acting, hugely emotional scene where Burnham was so betrayed by Tyler because she was in love. This was the first time she mentioned that she ever fell in love with someone, and she finds out that her lover, the one she trusted more than anyone, is a Klingon sleeper agent who wants to kill her. I mean, that was heartbreaking. I think the way they played it was amazing. The only slight issue I had with it is it seemed like I understand that Burnham didn't want to believe that her lover was this traitor or was like betraying her the whole time. I understand how she could have her initial reaction would be not to believe it and to try to push it away. But it still seemed to me like it took her way too long to accept the fact that this dude was a Klingon. She kept saying, "Oh, you're Tyler, you're still in there, I can change you." And I could buy her doing that for a bit, but the more he went on and started speaking in Klingon and being like, "Oh, you killed my master," and stuff like that, I think it took her a bit too long to finally just like be like, okay, fuck you, you betrayed me, and sort of accept that. So that was my only slight issue with that. I did think it was a bit interesting that they did have, she would have died had it not been for Mira Saru, who came and saved her, which is really interesting. And I like how she didn't try to, like, again, this is something Kirk wouldn't be very good at. When the others said, "I'll kill Tyler," she didn't try to deny that. She's like, "Yep, kill him. Go ahead. Beam him into space." How convenient it is, though, that their form of execution is beaming him into space that just allows Discovery to come by and beam him back again. How come the Shinji didn't detect that Discovery was nearby? But anyway, none of that really matters. And I love how, again, she's very good at putting on this act, because she goes up to Tyler and asks him why, if he has anything to say for himself, and he speaks Klingon, so she just punches him, which is the good act. But what she's really doing is she did like the, whatever, sleight of hand, where she put the information that she wanted Discovery and Saru to have about the Defiant, snuck it on there so they could get it. So that was cool. So she's actually really great at pretending to be this mirror person, where very clearly she's not. And she wasn't actually sending, like when she said, "Oh, he dies by my hand," you totally bought that. But really, she was just beaming him to a specific place so that Discovery would be able to beam him out again. So that's really interesting. Okay, so let me get in a bit about Stamets. I was a bit annoyed that they blamed Stamets for Colburn's murder, but they weren't very clear, because by the end of the episode it seems like those on Discovery know that Tyler's a Klingon and betrayed them. But did Burnham bother telling them that Tyler confessed to killing Dr. Colburn? I hope so. I'm pretty sure that would be the case. But yeah, so at first, I guess it's natural for them to think that it was Stamets, because he's in this crazy state of mind. They found him like cuddling the body, so I could see why they draw that conclusion. I just found it a bit frustrating. So I do hope they do make it clear by next week's episode that they do know that it wasn't Stamets that did that. But of course, they explain his whole mind was being shattered into these different universes, and that's something tardigrades are able to naturally be able to do, where he didn't have that sort of mindset, so it's sort of driving him insane. So they try to use the same sort of spore technology to save his life, and it looks like it's going to work, but then it doesn't work, and he dies. But then they find out, of course, that he's not really dead, because Stamets isn't really dead. Come on. And so we see this little scene of him and the Mirror Stamets, like, in this forest together, and the Mirror Stamets is like, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you," whatever. And I don't know. I can't really comment on that, because I don't know where they're going with it. So that's a sort of wait and see where they're going with this before I can really make any comments on that. It looks interesting, I will say that. And then, of course, the big reveal at the end of the episode is when the Emperor shows up and blows the rebels away, which pisses Tyler off. Pisses Michael Burnham off, because she wanted them to get away, and now makes it look like she betrayed them. And it was just, again, this is such a powerful scene, and this is something like I won't take credit for myself, but it's something one of my commenters mentioned on last week's video I did, that they thought that that Giorgio was the Emperor, and as soon as I heard that, I'm like, yes, that most certainly is the case, and that's something a lot of people picked up on. And so as soon as I heard that theory, I'm like, yeah, for sure. So when she showed up, I wasn't surprised. I was like, yeah, of course it's going to be, I don't know why I didn't think of this myself. Of course it's going to be Giorgio as the Emperor, so I wasn't surprised in that regard, but it was still great seeing the reaction, because, and like, again, this is amazing acting by Michael Burnham. Anyone who says that she's not a great actor is just wrong. It's flat out wrong. The way she played, like, the devastation, I was like, this is the worst possible thing that could happen to her. I mean, the person that she mourns the most, she feels the most guilt about being involved in this person's death. Seeing this evil version of her, like, that she knows she's gonna have to fight, and just seeing her there is like worst thing that could possibly happen to her. And it's just, and the whole look for this Emperor Giorgio was amazing. So I can't wait to see where they take this from here. That was just amazing. So another thing I have to give a real quick shout out to is the music. The music in this episode is amazing. I mean, I think the music in Discovery has always been good, but like for these past two episodes, they've just been, again, amazing. Like the quality is just so much better in the second half of this season. It's like the punctuation, the way the music just really raises like the tension level and the stakes. It's just amazing. So anyway, let me talk about, I want to touch on the theory that Lorca is from the Mirror Universe, because in the past, and even last week's episode, I was saying this is a done deal. That's definitely not the case. People who think this are flat out wrong. They're incorrect. It's been proven that's not the case. But I have to say I have lightened my position in that regard, because I have seen a lot of other like legitimate theories and like a lot of videos saying like that it's just as foreshadowed as Tyler being Vok. I think that's going too far, and I want to make it clear I'm still not on board with Lorca being on the Mirror Universe. I still do not think that's the case, and I don't want that to be the case, because I don't think that would be particularly good writing. But I'm more open to the possibility that I could be wrong, that maybe Lorca is from the Mirror Universe, because there is some sort of evidence beyond simply, oh, he's an asshole, so he must be from the Mirror Universe. Because you have to understand, that is why I was so dismissive of this theory, because originally, like back in the early first part of the season, that was the sole basis of that theory. Oh, he's an asshole, so he must be from the end. That is total bullshit. That there's no validity in that reasoning whatsoever. As I explained constantly, tons of assholes in the prime timeline. If that's your only reasoning for Lorca being in the Mirror Universe, then that's bullshit. But recently, there's been more reasonable was, evidence presented on why he might be from the mirror universe, such as he changed the coordinates when they jumped at the end of the episode 9. The jump that took them to the mirror universe, he changed their destination, and the fact that he knew, like he was the one that told Stamets that the spore drive could open up to parallel universes, and so the theory is that he because in this mirror universe, when they go there, they find out that the mirror Lorca was a rebel who wanted to kill the Emperor but then disappeared. So then it could feed into the theory that he disappeared into the Prime universe, and so his mission is to bring Discovery back to this universe to kill the Emperor. Now, I am going to get into a bit of spoilers. If you don't watch the after show, the After Track show, they played a scene, a very snippet from next week's episode, which I am about to discuss here. So if you don't want to hear that, you haven't seen the scene, you can skip ahead a couple minutes. But in that scene, this only, I think, helps that theory, because it shows that the information they got about the Defiant was redacted. There was a lot of things, so they found out like some information about the Defiant, but they couldn't, like how it got there was this weird null space thingy, but they didn't find out where this null space thingy is, so they have to go to the Imperial Palace in order to get more information, and apparently they're on their way there, like Lorca and Burnham, so apparently they've been summoned there. So he's like, well, it's a good thing we're on our way there, because then we can get this information about the Defiant. So this feeds into the theory that Lorca wants to kill the Emperor, and that's his ultimate plan. And so you could say that he was the one who redacted the information about the Defiant, so to force them to have to go to the palace, and while he's there, he can kill the Emperor, which is his ultimate mission. Now, as I said, I'm still not on board with this theory. I still don't think this is the case, because there's a lot of holes in this theory. First, truth among them is, how would Lorca know once they got to the parallel universe that they wouldn't be able to get back? How would he know that Stamets would go crazy and not be able to use the spore drive? Like, he didn't know that. I mean, he knew that Stamets didn't want to use it anymore, and that was slowly sort of affecting them, but I don't think there's any way he could possibly know, because I don't think the spore drive has anything that wasn't in the mirror universe. So I don't think he would have any more knowledge on the spore drive than anyone else. So how did he know that when they went to the mirror universe they wouldn't simply be able to go right back? How would he know that they would need to find out about this Defiant thing? And also, the main reason why I don't want this theory to be the case is because this was explained very well in like that other episode when he was having sex with Cornwell, as I said, that he was suffering from PTSD, and that is why, like, losing his ship, and it affected him, and that's, she wanted to relieve him of his command because of this. To me, that's a perfectly really good character explanation. If you throw in, he's actually from the evil universe, that to me ruins his character a bit. And also, as for the explanation of why he changed the coordinates, again, there's a simpler explanation for this. I actually talked about this, the discussion video I did with my brother at the end of the first half season, is that Cornwell had been rescued, and Cornwell wants to strip him of his command, so he changed the coordinates because he doesn't want to go back to where Cornwell is, because he doesn't want to be stripped of his command. Now, what his ultimate goal was, I mean, what he's going to do, run away or whatever, I don't know. Maybe he wanted to go to a parallel universe to hide, not because he's from there, but because he doesn't want Cornwell to take away his command. I think that's also a perfectly reasonable explanation, and I think it's more in the universe. And plus, the way he was acting, like, throughout this whole, like, last episode, he was really acting like he had no idea about the mirror universe. He was about to speak to, the Shinzu at first, until Burnham had to be the one to say, disguise your voice. Now, I mean, what if she didn't say that? Would he just go ahead and just speak and give away who he is, and then everyone would be like, because if he's really from the mirror universe, he would know that actually using his own voice is a bad thing. And then there's also, like, the agonizing booth. Like, it seems to me he had no idea that he would be thrown in this agonizing booth, and that would be his punishment. And actually, I think that has a lot more weight to it. It's a lot more powerful if he didn't know about the agonizing booth and he just thought he would hide in the ship, but he has to spend it in agony. I mean, of course you could say, well, he's just putting on an act. He is from the mirror universe. He was just pretending not to be. I mean, sure, like I said, Burnham's really good at putting on an act to pretending to be in the mirror universe, so you could say Mirror Lorca is good at putting on an act to pretend to be in the prime universe. I mean, that's plausible, but I think that's, I don't know, it's not as good storytelling to me. I just don't think it works as well in terms of storytelling. So even though I am cracking a bit on the possibility that he could be from the mirror universe, I'm still very, very, very hoping that he isn't, because I think, I don't know, that would kind of deplete some of the power of his character story, but that's just me. Anyway, enough of that. Let me get into my rating for this episode. Out of 10, and I will give it a 9. Excellent. Really great episode. I didn't pack quite the punch as last week's episode did, as I said, but there was still some really great acting. The revelation of Tyler and Work scene was done really well. Some of the Stamets stuff was a bit weird and a bit out there, but and then there wasn't as much greatness to this episode as last week's, but it was still a really powerful episode, a really good continuation of the second half season. It's going in a really great place, so really excited to see if they can keep up this momentum. So that is it for my review of Star Trek Discovery Episode 11. Be sure to check back here every week as I continue to review episodes of Discovery. Also check out my channel as I do many other videos on many other Star Trek videos. Also cover other shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Black Mirror, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.